everybody!
Greetings.
Look who is back and joining me for today's video. There's a very specific reason for that.
That's true. While my reading has not necessarily been the most prolific, though manga and anime count.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Manga and comics
yeah.
absolutely count. I haven't been much with the books. Why did I say it that like? Not even that way. That's how long it's been since I've been out of commission. However, today is a special episode.
Because I wanted to talk about all of the anime that we have watched so far in the first quarter of the year.
That hasn't gone away, interestingly enough.
I think, as most people would know, I generally tend to prefer watching anime with Macky. Like, we do, that's like our weekly thing. We'll watch anime episodes and stuff. Like, there are some that he'll watch on his own and some I'll watch on my own, but there are definitely some staples where we're like, we are both interested in seeing how the story goes.
And by and what that really means is just feral, just like reactions for 30 minutes.
Me.
I mean, I'm feral too. It's a whole thing.
Anyway, we have 8 things to talk about this time. The first one is the only one that's slightly different because it's a movie and it's a rewatch.
Ah, yes.
So we're going to talk about Suzume, which we rewatched at the beginning of the year when Macky's brother was in town visiting us.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes it even more special. But I don't remember if I've ever mentioned it anywhere here on YouTube before.
Even if we did.
But I love Suzume. Maybe not as much as I love Your Name, which is still my favorite of Makoto Shinkai, who is the director, writer, of these films. But I do really love Suzume because it does so many things so well.
So Makoto Shinkai is already known for his stunning imagery of like the sky and skylines and horizons, both urban and sort of like rural and maybe a combination of both. It's all very atmospheric, especially with but the thing that he adds to Suzume, which did not exist in any of his previous work, is sort of like this fantasy lore set in an urban setting where you just have the most stunning visual graphic depictions of things, and in my head I'm like, my god, what is happening here? I mean, we were sort of like dabbling with fantasy and magical realism, but now we are straight up just fantastical.
It's sci fantasy.
It is it is so good. And so even from a purely visual design element perspective, just mind blowing. Story wise, does not disappoint. Still within the same pocket. I find.
Yeah.
But those are the two things that sort of like kick you in the face the minute it sort of like presents itself to you, both in the trailer and as the thing unfolds.
I think in the terms of the story, it does what the other 2 Makoto Shinkai films of this vein. Like, he has a lot of other work before that, but the 2 other films that I'm talking about are Your Name and Weathering With You. It does that thing where like the beginning is so unassuming. It's just like very slice of life. There is maybe like a funny situation or like an interesting situation, but it doesn't really blow up until it actually does, and then you're in the thick of it and you're like, what is happening? And I love that because it goes from being a very like personal, individual person story to becoming like, it's still run by them, but the consequences of what is actually happening become universal.
So much larger.
And like that is, it's just such a scaled thing, and I think that's very epic and monumental of all of the films, which I have loved.
No, agreed. And the spectrum is always going to start with the most beautiful mundane to the most fantastical sort of like out of the ordinary type deal. Yeah. And that is something that I feel is his thing.
Yeah, he does it so well.
It's his thing.
Even we recently watched too. Oh, I didn't even think to put that one in here.
We can put in a footnote.
We're gonna mention just briefly. We also watched, what is it?
Voices of a Distant Star.
And that
which he apparently did on his computer. It's a short film about a young couple, sort of like burgeoning love between them, and one of them gets drafted to be part of a space program that ends up in calamity, and it sort of centers around the exchanges that they send to each other over light years, and the messages become further and further away, and how they navigate that. So obviously that was like the humble beginnings.
And that's like it's like 24, 30 minutes. It's not long, but like you can already see the seeds of what kind of storyteller he is.
And how terribly sad he used to be.
It's so tragic.
It's actually better now.
But yeah,
Suzume is arguably the happiest he's ever.
Actually, I was gonna say Suzume has the happiest, confirmed happiest.
Confirmed happiest.
I would say confirmed, because Your Name technically ends on a good note, like a happier leaning note.
And if you only watched Your Name, you wouldn't know what the hell happened after the ending.
Oh yeah.
Weathering With You is arguably like terrible the way it ended. Like, I mean, at the cost of what shall this love be?
But see,
so without spoiling it too much.
That's always the thing in his stories, though. It's like there are these individuals at the cost of their individual wants, desires, needs, dreams, are they going to let the world pay the price? That generally tends to be a theme in all his work, if you've noticed.
and so literally when you say Makoto Shinkai's will they, won't they?
Yeah.
It's will they or won't they let their love get in the way of saving the world. So you know what?
It's really spoilery to say anything else about Suzume, but I will tell you, it's handled differently in that one compared to the other two.
And thus, therefore, arguably the happiest thing he's ever written.
Yeah, probably. And also, aside from the beautiful visuals, we also
Girl.
have to give some credit to that banging soundtrack.
Girl. So Radwimps has always been and here's the thing, it's super rare for anyone in one genre to collaborate with somebody from another genre regularly.
Oh, yeah.
So the Radwimps have scored Your Name and a lot of Weathering With You. This time, I could be wrong, I'll research this, he actually sent like the script of Suzume to the Radwimps, and the Radwimps guys are like, all right, we got you. And it's
so good. It's one of those musical and story pairings that works so well for a feature film. And the same thing, it's sort of in the same vein of like Ghibli and Joe Hisaishi. It's like that.
Yeah,
it's like that.
In the same vein, but of course because it's urban and it's
there's like a very symbiotic relationship between the Radwimps sound and how they chose to write music for the movies and how Makoto Shinkai depicts things.
Absolutely. And needless to say, that is exactly the kind of like aesthetic that I aspire to, because me and my brother obviously have like this thing going on between us with like sort of the creative collaborations. So it's like when I grow up, I will be Makoto Shinkai and the Radwimps like put together. That's like
you guys will be the whole collection.
Yeah, well, it'll be just like someday. But anyway, so that's
we
highly recommended.
Can you tell we loved it?
Just grab it. Like the collector's edition is out on Crunchyroll, like the store. Just go for it. It's a thing.
Rolling right along, we're going to talk about anime, and I'm going to kind of switch the order of some of these things
like
because one is all of them except one are technically season ones that we started. So we're going to start with the one that's not a season one, and it's Jujutsu Kaisen. Here's all I can say about Jujutsu Kaisen. It is not the typical thing that I would watch personally. It's more a little bit, I think, leaning towards Macky's wheelhouse. But the thing is, I really enjoy it because the mangaka did a really good job with the characters and making them people I like, basically. So despite the other elements that don't necessarily work for me, like the more horror-leaning elements, I still enjoy it and have a good time. However, the only thing I can say about this season is it's beautiful. Like, as usual, there's like very good visuals and everything, but it brought me so much pain. I feel like this was like the second season, and all I was doing from like after the first, there's like 2 parts to this season. There's like a flashback part, which is like a couple of episodes, and it talks about 2 characters that are now adults in the modern day. And that story I already was familiar with because I had read it in the manga. So it was fun for me to see it like brought to life. And that one, I was still emotional, but not as, because I knew what was going to happen. Listen, I went into the rest of it unprepared. 100% unprepared.
To be fair, nobody's prepared. And
yeah, Macky can attest to it. I feel like every single week, every single episode, there was just something new that would make me scream. And it was like literal, like pained screaming now. This is not like fangirl, like, oh my gosh, that was so fantastic. No, this is like me being like, I am dying. I'm dying a slow death right now. Help me.
So in the media, I say that like it's such a sneer. In the media, Jujutsu Kaisen has allegedly like eclipsed One Piece in terms of popularity, which is fine. However, everyone who's been caught up on the manga,
not me,
has been sort of like posting videos of in response to all of the outrage of those who've been watching the anime, and every single one of them, like not every, but majority of the theme is, you think this is bad now.
I'm scared.
Don't worry, it's gonna get worse.
And yet we're gonna watch it anyway.
The difference, I feel like, and yet we're gonna watch it anyway because you get invested in these characters. My fearless prediction here is that it is going the route of Attack on Titan.
Oh, bold words, considering I just finished that one.
In terms of, do we care? Let's see. So it's a whole thing. So that's into it. It is that stressful. I would argue that because it's a different genre from Attack on Titan, down the line we're gonna see some characters shining. Mm-hmm. And that's something and that's just classic shonen.
Yeah.
And you will get it.
Yeah.
How you get it and what happens afterwards, we're going to find out.
Great season, though. I did enjoy it. Because the fact is, I was emotionally invested. I cared what was going to happen.
I mean, I'm still emotionally invested.
That's where we're at.
Here we go.
Okay, but in a complete contrast, and this one I have a backstory for. So the reason we started watching this was because I saw an Instagram post and I was like, this looks like something I would love.
She saw a post.
It spoils the ending
actual bloody finale
of season 2. So it's season 1 and season 2 of The Saint's magic power is Omnipotent.
Yep.
And it's basically another isekai story, kind of, where the main character gets isekai'd into another world, but she gets isekai'd at the same time as someone else. And so, the usual isekai thing is like, you're the hero or the saint. And in this world, they were trying to summon a saint.
Yeah.
One of the princes claims the other individual is the saint. And so this girl is just like there and she can't go back. Like they haven't figured out how to do that.
Yep.
And so she's like, well, I guess since I'm like the spare, I'm just gonna make a life for myself in my own way. And so she does, right? She gets interested in being like an apothecary, and then she starts befriending all these individuals, and it just kind of follows her adventures from there. And I totally enjoyed myself. Unsurprising, because I love, that's one of my favorite isekai things, where it's like an ordinary person gets isekai'd somewhere else. The circumstances are not ideal, but they don't end up being like the hero main character. They're just like, oh, I'm just gonna go live my life in this world according to my rules. And then they inadvertently get drawn into the main.
Right. And fortunately for me, it was such an interesting like story to begin with that it now became countdown to the spoiler, because I'm like, all right, give me the thing in the end that we saw.
Obviously, I spoiled Macky too, because I sent him the post. And
and then I saw it and I'm like,
watch it.
And so my first impulse was like, oh, now we know how it ends. And then my next impulse was like, bet, let's do this. And so we did. It was great. Highly recommended if you like that kind of slice of life isekai.
I was going to say, it's very slice of life isekai.
Yeah.
And the stakes are like, they look very high stakes, but it's actually not high stakes because everything gets resolved pretty quickly. Like when something happens.
I mean, if the finale that we wanted happens in season 2, then that's it, right? These are 12 episode like seasons. Just blitz through.
We just blitzed through the whole thing.
It's a nice
drag Macky's brother into it too, because he was here, so he watched it with us.
That was great.
It was the first time I think he'd ever gotten to see me watch an anime in person.
Oh, it was lovely. It was lovely. It was
the usual screaming, fangirling, and actually me predicting what would happen next ensued, because again, it's very formulaic.
But that's why we watch these things.
Yeah, it's formulaic, but there was just enough about it to make it different.
Like if you're craving a burger, you don't want to order a burger and go, oh, it's suddenly shrimp, not beef.
No.
Unless that's what you go for, in which case,
Correct. Fine. So yeah, it is exactly what I wanted out of it at the time. So especially after, like, while Jujutsu Kaisen was happening, of course you would want one that brings peace to your soul as opposed to like screaming. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of things, this is like the thing where you combine the screaming and the slice of life. I don't know what to tell you. This is probably my favorite of all the one. I don't think it's Macky's favorite, but it's mine. Yeah. We finally watched the first season of My Happy Marriage. And the amount of screaming I did watching that show is unparalleled. I think I was just like losing it the entire time. And this, even though I knew the plot of the story for the most part, I think I knew until like maybe episode 6 or 7, and then it goes beyond the manga, which is what I've read. It's so good. First of all, it's beautiful to look at.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Second of all, I just love that story so much already, and to see it animated, to see some of the moments I love best, like they're moving and talking, I'm just like, I can't survive this. I can't. We binged the entire thing in a night.
I was gonna say 2 things. The minute I saw the first episode, I'm like, let's go, like just all the way. Like we are not gonna stop until we find out how this resolves. 1 and 2. I'm reading the light novels. If anybody wants to know how I feel about this, I am, of the many things I know I started this thing with, I'm not reading anymore. I've actually finished the first light novel after where the anime ends. I'm actually on like the 4th one, I think, already. So
you can tell he's also
invested. Can tell I'm kinda into it.
I love it so much. It's got the vibes of a Cinderella story, basically, which is what I think appealed to me initially. But the fact that they're able to combine some sort of paranormal, fantastical stuff,
it evokes like these classic TV dramas where there's people who are incredibly cruel to our main character.
Yeah,
and then
Cinderella, very Cinderella, because it's familial characters.
Yeah, but like on like crap, because it's just there's a lot of just like overt like we will ruin your life. Like it's just the whole. It's more than just being petty and we're talking like really cruel. Like they are out to get you kind of dynasty. Yeah. Like it's a whole thing.
It actually kind of, and I've said this to other people, but there's a part of it in particular that calls to mind like an old Taiwanese drama that I watched called Meteor Garden. Oh my god. It has the same level of like villainous individuals and how they're villainous, and I was just like, this is bringing me back.
It's like Meteor Garden but with monsters. Anyway,
it's so interesting, and it ends on a pretty solid note, but you just know that there's so much more happening. I'm
well,
sure Macky
not
has
solid enough that I wanted to read the light novels right after. So you know what?
And I'm excited
It is
because
a
there is
slippery
a season
slope.
2.
Oh,
There
hell,
will
there
a
better
season
be.
2. So exciting. Speaking of like slice of life stories, this is one we started, I think, on a whim a little
Randomly,
bit.
yes.
We watched Frieren, Beyond Journey's End.
Yeah.
And also really love it. This is also another one where, like, if you don't want something that will stress you out overly much, you should watch it because it's very slice of life.
But it is incredibly emotional.
And has shenanigans.
And has shenanigans. Minor shenanigans. I would say like 10% shenanigans and 90% like feels. Because the whim came from the fact that Frieren was getting so many reviews. It's like the next big thing.
And the
like,
images were just like beautiful.
I know, yeah.
No! Oh, this was another one where I also saw fan art for it. Which apparently
That's
was
right.
spoilery. It was spoilery,
a
and I
bit.
didn't know it at the time. I just thought it was fan art.
And
And I was like, I want to meet these characters.
And unlike with the Omnipotent Saint, this one wasn't like a big spoiler.
No,
but it did allude to like two characters where I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this looks yummy. We gotta do this.
Right? Okay.
And so we did, and we're like, why is this so emotionally like just poignant?
It's so good, and I love it because it doesn't do the traditional hero's journey thing because it's after the hero's journey and after the people in the hero's party, most of them have, you know, either passed or they're getting on in age, and then you have Frieren,
who is an elf, and therefore kind of, I mean, immortal
almost
to
immortal.
a point.
Long live it.
Long live,
maybe
for sure.
Is like the best.
And so to have that kind of, and I grew up on like Highlander and like vampires, and so to have that sort of what happens if my lifespan is literally up to the hundreds and maybe up to 1,000 years, what then is my life and how is the world changing around me? What does that do to my bonds, my relationships? How is my relationship to the past affecting the present? It's all of that yummy goodness.
Yeah, and it does it so well.
Yeah.
It does the callbacks to like things she has experienced with the heroes party she was part of, and then just brings it sort of into connection with her present, where she has her own little like heroes party now.
Which is, again, I feel like such a unique thing to when your main characters are immortals, because there will always be an intersection of this is what happened 300 years ago, this is what happened 50 years ago, and this is how it sort of like, it resonates to the present, and it jumps back and forth between then. So good.
Yeah, it's such a compelling story, and we just, like, when we were watching it, we're just like, we were in it. We're in it.
We're in it for the long haul. So
also, I just
recommended.
love Frieren also, because I think she's funny. She's so funny to me.
Frieren is
like,
so...
And
like,
I love that they gave her, like, this character where she, like, all she really wants is to collect spells.
Yep,
that's her thing.
That's her thing.
And, like, she's interested now more than ever about, like, bonds with people and what that means. And, you know, it causes her to reflect on the one she previously had and everything. But, like, her thing is, like, I want to collect spells. And they're not, like, magnificent spells.
It's just
We're
any
talking
spell.
about, like, any spell.
Yep.
She's like, I got one to keep our clothes clean, and I got one to, like, you know.
So it's spells and then maybe people. That's it. Like, that's the whole thing.
That's basically. Yeah. Moving on, I mentioned earlier an apothecary. We're going to talk about my other favorite show.
Because there's another apothecary that we apparently like.
So I saw the visual, like the poster for this, and I was like, oh, we're going to watch that because it looks like something I would like.
Because it's like historic. It's set in historic period.
Yes.
It looks like historic. Like
it is
ancient
historic.
China,
it must have been ancient China or ancient China inspired, maybe.
Yeah, but it's not. Like, there's no mention of the actual name of the kingdom or
the
whatever.
time period. Even,
or the time period. It's just
the visuals.
set. It's just set at a time where there is an emperor, there are concubines, there is a secluded area
there's
for
like
them.
a rear palace, a front palace. There's all this stuff.
Right. There's thing about heirs and, you know, as many heirs as the kingdom should possibly have.
Yep.
And then cut to our main character, who happens to be an apothecary's daughter, who is herself training to be an apothecary.
Did we even say the title of this show? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
It's called The Apothecary Diaries.
Which, duh.
And as Macky said, it is about an apothecary's daughter.
Yeah.
Who is also an apothecary.
Who
is named Mamo.
And at one point in time just gets randomly kidnapped and sold to be a servant
in the palace.
In the palace. And then gets caught up in the shenanigans of a sort of like mystery behind. And this is the first mystery of the many that she'll solve. We didn't know what to expect. This is what you expect. It's a lot of murder mystery.
Or different kinds of like situations.
Sabotage mystery. Yep. It's a lot of mysteries that apparently somebody with an apothecary background and knowledge about like minerals and like elements and can sort of like pick apart, because she does have the acumen to put two and two and two together to paint a larger picture that none of the people in charge can actually do by themselves.
I think what I like about it the best is Momo herself, because her ability to help solve these mysteries is not only rooted in her apothecary skills, like she knows her herbs and her like the different things that would react to each other, but it's also informed by the fact that she partly grew up in a courtesan house and knows how to read other people's behavior. Because, like, that is a lot of what she also looks at in terms of tells. Like, she will consider certain things and observe certain things or interactions other people are having, which I always find fascinating. And obviously her big character trait is, like, she's very hyper-focused on the fact that she's like, I'm going to keep my head down and do my work. But then if you put a poison in front of her or something like
she gets
toxic, she's like excited because she likes experimenting with it.
It's like CSI Imperial Palace. That's just basically how that is.
It's fun because you watch her go from like, I do not want to be involved. I just want to keep my head down and like stay low. And then she ends up getting involved at first on accident, right? Because she can't help herself. She wants to do the right thing. And then eventually she's like, every time they come to her with it, she's like, okay, let me think about this. Let me do it. And she cares eventually about certain people around.
All because the alleged eunuch who everybody has a crush on, that is the handsomest man on the planet. Handsomest, prettiest man on the planet, apparently, has taken an interest in her. And the whole time she's like, I don't know what this eunuch is doing. I guess I see that he's such a beautiful man and he kind of knows it. Who ends up sort of having feelings from her.
I think he likes her. And I ship it so hard.
And we ship it so hard. And then we discover, and then, because this is the kind of story, we discover everybody's backstories. Yeah. In which case, what a treat and what a joy.
You know what's interesting? I think it helps to have the mysteries because otherwise this would just be about court intrigue and fireplace.
Yeah. And I sort of tune court intrigue out.
The mysteries for me are what make it more interesting because it's funny because at first you think it's very episodic. Like there's a new mystery every week and that's sort of what we had come to expect.
Agreed.
And then at some point it starts weaving itself together because it turns out there is actually a connection.
That's right.
And then it involves some sort of like, powerful individuals.
Or some kind of conspiracy, or just like stupidity in general. So for her, I mean, just because people don't know any better until they do.
Yeah.
Remember when one particular empire decided, hey, we're going to put lead in everything. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that having been said, if you like slice of life and at the same time mysteries and shipping.
Yeah.
This one's for
the aesthetic of it is also beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah, how gorgeous.
They have some beautiful scenes.
And plus like historical romance.
Yeah, it's basically a very slow burn.
Of a very clearly Asian,
The humor in it also gets me sometimes because there are like some moments that are unexpectedly funny.
Yeah, I know. It's just like
it'll happen and you're like, I was not expecting to laugh this hard at this moment. I can think of a few right now. It's so good. I enjoy it so much. I'm excited because that one's also supposedly getting a season 2. So.
Agreed.
Okay, 2 more. We have Villainess level 99. I may be the hidden boss, but I'm not the demon lord or something.
This is another one of those I got isekai'd into an otome game, which is for those of you who may not necessarily know.
Even I don't know why we clicked it. Maybe because we like Villainess.
Yeah, we just like Villainesses because one of our biggest, most like well-loved comfort animes has to do with a dumbass.
My Next Life as a Villainess?
Who was isekai'd into
also an otome game.
Yeah, because of the many kinds of isekai things, there is a subsection to where you will get ported into a game, but not like a hack and slash game, but a dating sim. This one, she gets ported into a dating sim, but instead of being ported into it as the main character, she's not ported in as the she's not even the villain.
She's not even the actual
villain,
or like the actual villain.
But there is a secret boss that you have to defeat in the game, and she ends up becoming the secret boss. Gotta say, this took us for a ride. It's not quite as comforting as My Next Life as a Villainess with Katarina.
It's a little more sped up than I would like in terms of the storytelling. There's a lot of like, oh, we're gonna do a few months of training, and then it just skips forward and stuff.
But it's pretty satisfying.
I like the characters. I think they're fun.
Yeah, and everybody goes through a wide arc.
I like that.
For all of us truncated, the arcs are neck break sort of like turns.
The characters went in this one actually.
Agreed.
I think it's really fun.
Yeah, some of them start out like incredibly detestable, and then in the end you're like, all right, I guess you're a decent human being now. So it's a whole, again, truncated but kind of satisfying ride.
Yeah, and I just like that. I like that the main character is like, she's already like, I'm gonna just level up my skills, I'm just gonna do this stuff. And like, she's so single-minded about certain things that she's kind of oblivious to other things. So she's smart in some ways and not so smart in other ways.
very like, just very neurospicy, even the way she approaches things. And I'm just like, girl, I know what you're doing, because I do that in real life. I mean, nobody diagnosing anybody here, but at the same time...
I also like that she has a very unique view of the world. Like, the things that she thinks are cute and fascinating are not necessarily things that other people would,
Which is, again, classic anime stuff, right? Where you just venture straight into absurdia with no explanations. But again, satisfying ride. Definitely. I mean, we finished it, so obviously that's a tell.
And can confirm there's also a ship in this one that I love.
Oh, and it came out of left field, and I'm like, oh, we are living for that.
Please, I was living for it from the first time they interacted. I was like, yes.
And did we hit pay dirt?
Anyway. Yeah. Speaking of, almost every single thing we've talked about, with the exception of Jujutsu Kaisen, has a ship that I ship. I should mention this.
It's so good.
Because Frieren also It has
Girl.
one. There's two actually that I really love in Frieren, and then Apothecary's obvious.
I should Frieren and the Mimics. Anyway.
Fair.
Meant to be. All right,
Okay,
now
we're gonna end on a really
the pièce
high
de
note.
résistance.
We're gonna end on a really high note because honestly, this is probably the one
high
where,
note, like we weren't half manic and feral this whole time.
To be fair, like I have loved a lot of these, but this is the third of all of them that is a 5-star. I want to say, or the fourth. Sorry, it's the fourth of all of them that is a 5-star, and it's Solo Leveling.
It sat on our shelf for like a year and change.
No, yeah, we had the first 5 volumes for the longest time, and I was like, "This sounds like something we would both enjoy," but we just never got around to reading it.
And then my brother shows up, and then we thought, oh, okay, Solo Leveling is premiering soon. We may as well just start reading the manhwa that we have on thing. And so because he was on vacation, and he was so like while we were off, he's like, all right, here's the manhwa, go have fun. We come home, he's like devouring it, right? So I have one of my favorite photos of all time is a photo of me, Alexa, and then my brother, and they were all reading different volumes of Solo Leveling. And I think that was the time when we already pre-ordered like the other two that were already out that weren't just in the house.
So what happened was we had the first 5, then Macky had to buy 6 and 7 because we didn't have them yet, and then he pre-ordered 8 because that was coming out later in the month.
Which it showed up
and I'm just like, I already knew it was going to be the kind of story we would enjoy just because of the premise alone.
It just felt good.
And honestly, I don't think any of us expected to love it as much as we do.
This much, no. It was such a sleeper hit.
First of all, for me, a big tell was the fact that his brother just like blew through it. Like he read it so fast and he could not stop reading it. That's always a good sign, right?
And
then
while
the
that's
same thing happened to me, and I just screamed the whole time I was reading it.
Oh my god,
And you have since not just read what's published.
Right,
physically.
It just, I went on a deep rabbit hole.
You blasted through like the webtoon.
Yeah,
version.
so you know what? We're gonna like.
And the fact that you went out of your way to tell me after, you're like, no, it's a good story.
It's really good. Like I am going to collect everything that comes out just because of like that's a thing. Like why do we love what we love? For whatever reasons they're going to make you want to collect things, perhaps. That happened here. It's going to keep happening. I adore Jinwoo's story. For those of you who don't know,
I was going to say, maybe you should tell them what it's about.
Solo Leveling happens in a world where, for the last 10 years, people have started to sort of like come awake with powers that are static, meaning if you're, and can be ranked. So if you're an A-class tier kind of like fighter or mage, then that's where you're going to stay forever and ever in a million years. It's been around for 10 years because rifts and portals have been opening up to dungeons all over the world. Some of them break through and out into our world, and you need these magically enhanced people to either control the population and or go in there, shut them down, maybe mine some good stuff, and like
it's
change
a whole career path. You can
change the economy. The whole world is trading in all of these goods from these other worlds and these rifts, and it's sort of become it's both a health hazard and a deterrent to to be a hunter.
Yep.
Our story centers around Jinwoo, dubbed the weakest hunter of all time because even the lowest ranked dungeons may kill him. So he's he's an E rank, so he may as well be one of the mortals. He may as well be one of the Mundies.
He has like very, very little,
absolutely little to no power
magical.
at all, and he's just doing it because it's the best way. By the way, a result of all of these rifts was that a lot of people have sort of like fallen into an illness that nobody can wake from. So it's kind of like this weird kind of like coma that's not a coma.
Yeah.
And his mother apparently falls into one of that, and that's why he's
doing it. Yep.
His father disappeared for a long time. I think his father was a hunter too. Disappeared. His mother went to that coma. He's the only breadwinner in the house. His sister's still in school.
Yep.
So that's why he's risking life and limb. It's very relatable right away. Then
a mission goes wrong.
Very wrong. Like the mission goes wrong in the worst possible way.
And
opening up an opportunity that makes that is the best possible thing that could happen to somebody like him.
Yep. And
where
explain what the opportunity is.
The opportunity is that after enduring arguably the worst battle and therefore arguably death, he comes out of it surprisingly unscathed with the secret ability to actually get stronger. So he's the only individual
by himself.
He
doesn't need anyone else.
So he's the only individual on the planet who has been awakened with powers that can level up.
And it's interesting because the way it's portrayed is like a gamified thing, because it has sort of like a bunch of screens, and
which we've seen in isekai, in the isekai genre, which we've seen in like games like things like Sword Art. But for them to sort of like tickle your brain that the way he's discovering these powers about himself is through like game screens. with no explanation.
And there's no instruction manual, there's nothing. Like, he knows nothing about it, and he just has to keep experiencing things.
Right. Screens
to
pop
widen
up,
what
he has
knows.
an inventory. And so, while that's never explained, and I appreciate that it's not, because when it just is. I love that that's the world now. Like when people talk about elves, no one, like, you know, when Tolkien like started writing about elves, nobody was like, well, what's the genetic, like, nobody cared.
No.
That's what's happening here in this era,
Which I
where
appreciate.
there's a screen. Who gives a crap? Press yes, no, accept the you know, there's
accept
a
the
warning.
challenge, or don't accept the challenge.
You know,
you get a reward.
Assess like life bars and stuff like that. Even yours. Buy
I think it's
stuff.
also helpful because we live in a very digital age, so a lot of people are familiar with this sort of thing, more so than probably maybe like 10, 15
No, agreed.
years ago.
And because there's a distinct skipping of expositional things in Eastern storytelling, by as opposed to like in Western storytelling, there's a, you ease people in, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
As opposed to, no, there's a giant bear on a person's back and he's just carrying them around. Like, that's the level of no.
Yeah,
Solo leveling is that.
I agree. I enjoy the characters in this one, but they're actually not the main draw for me. Like, even though I get like really excited to see a lot of them on page and to see them interact, what I actually really enjoy is the plot. Because I find it so compelling. Like, that was the reason I couldn't put down the manual, because I was like, oh my god, I just need to know what happens next. Oh my gosh, how is he going to get out of this? Oh my gosh, what is he doing next? Like, it's just that successive, like, building. And it's funny because it's like, you know, I'm hyper-focusing, let's say, on him.
Yeah.
There's actually things going on outside of him
So good.
that will eventually intersect with his story. And I
So
think
good.
that part, like, it happens a little bit later on in the manhwa in particular, but, like, my goodness, it's so satisfying. I think the one thing the anime is doing that I appreciate is that they're starting to have it be in the background early on, so that it's not so much like an abrupt drop to like, here's the history of this, blah, blah, blah. No, you actually are already you have a picture that's starting to form in your head of like, this event occurred and these are the people involved, and, you know.
And here's the deal. There's very, very little, like, you know, like, variance with regard to experiencing the difference between a manga and an anime, right? They're usually pretty decent about those things. But what this adaptation does and here's we are watching so when the first episode of Solo Leveling drops this like or early this year,
yeah.
we are fresh off of reading like at the very least the first like couple of volumes. And the fact that they're already taking liberties by embellishing stories and like visually depicting things that that happened off page, but did happen like concurrently at certain times, we're like, they're making it better. What is happening?
They're just enhancing it. And I think
so
it works because there's like a complete story, right? You can only really take those liberties if you have the material to work with and you know what you want to build up.
Agreed. And unlike, let's say, for example, like Naruto, one of our all-time favorites, where
always
we're not like, I'm dragging my feet on, is there a Blu-ray? You know what I mean? I actually might want to collect the Blu-rays for this one, only because it's adding more that's not fillerific.
Agreed.
And it's actually elevating the experience of the story to something so much greater.
I am with you.
Here's the thing. I am notorious for not really liking the main character of an action
That's
series.
Fair. That's
right?
fair. I also can't think of
all the action series that I love. Naruto, Black Clover, Fullmetal Alchemist. all these things.
I'm not usually
I never
drawn to
liked the main character.
I
am Team Jinwoo. I am 100. Like,
Listen,
I am like.
Jinwoo's an older brother. I mean, we're done. Like, that's it. That's all I needed. Like, you don't even have to tell me that he was leveling up.
And here's the thing: there are still some side characters that I adore infinitely more than Jinwoo. But the fact that he's headlining his own show, and I like him the most, and arguably better than a lot of main characters who headline their shows.
Yeah.
Like, love me some Asta, but he's kind of a dumbass. I love Jinwoo.
Actually, a lot of them.
I mean, yeah, you know what I mean?
Or too naive. It's either they're dumb or they're naive.
As opposed to Jinwoo, who is kind of like, there's a naivety to him, but he immediately grows out of that just of years of his...
as he's learning too.
If
He
anything,
adapts to it.
if anything, the first episode justifies why he's grown out of his naivety, because he's had to learn to be better because he's the worst at his job.
Can you tell we really love Solo Leveling? Because
Just
we've been
a
talking
little,
about it for a
so-
while. But I will say also the other thing that I have to appreciate about the manhwa in particular, which I think is also true of the webtoon, is the style. Because I like it even better than how it's animated, to be honest with you. Like, they're really close. But it's just like the way it's drawn.
There's something,
is so...
it's glossier. There's a
I don't know how to
sheen.
explain it. It's just like...
Oh, there's an edge to it.
Yeah.
There's an edge to it that has softened because it's animated now.
Yes.
But there is a sharpness and a vibrance.
And it's just a story so well.
Yeah.
That's something I really love about the manhwa. For the anime, the other thing I want to say that I really love is I know a lot of people... well, I feel like the general consensus is a little divided on this, but I love the opening song. I think the opening song sets the tone so
We're-
perfectly
we're-
for
we're-
this show. It also doesn't help that I'm a TXT fan. Like, in general, when they do, like, their OST stuff.
Yeah, like one of our favorite Black Clover openings was by this particular
Oh, yeah.
group. So that they did it, and I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, it's really good. It's kind of a banger. So you know what?
It really is a
I mean, people have different expectations. People
That's
need to
true.
love what they love. We're
obviously
apparently
very team,
just
like-
we love TXT.
Damn,
Like,
this makes me want to read Solo Leveling
I want to
again.
reread it all over again. That's
This
how
is
works.
constantly happening to us, mind you. I feel like we've said it like 10 billion times since we started
And
watching the anime. We're
that I
like,
wanna do, like,
I gotta reread it. I gotta reread it. It's just that good. Like, it's such a compelling story. And I genuinely feel like most people will enjoy it. Because it's not... how do I explain this? It's not just very plot driven in that there's a lot of action and like there's definitely like scaling, right? Like he's leveling up. That's the whole point of the story. You know what else I find very interesting, and I think it's more a subtext thing right now than anything else, and I don't think Macky will confirm or deny if it becomes a bigger part. It's the character arc that Jinwoo has, specifically because he's gaining all of this. Because you can't just go from being some weak hunter who has constantly suffered at the hands of other people and like the monsters you face and become this like incredible fighter with a power you don't understand and that's influencing certain like directions like your leveling up is taking. You don't experience that change without some sort of character change either. And like you can sort of see hints of that in the manhwa, and I feel like that's one of those things that's just going to be deliciously good when I get to the end. I'm hoping, because that's one of the things I find the most fascinating, because I'm like, what kind of change would this wrought in you as a person just to have your power scaled like this, or the ability to scale on your own with no outside help?
My response to that is I want to reread everything again. So
Clearly you can tell we had a very good like quarter of anime, because there was a lot of stuff that we just loved. Like it was really across the board. I'm pretty sure like most of this we just loved. Even for me, I guess if we were gonna like say which one was like maybe like not as beloved to me or is gonna stay with me as long, it's probably Villainess level 99. It was fun, but it's not one of the ones where I could look back on it and be like, that was very memorable. I'll probably remember like two things: the Derpy Dragon.
The Derpy Dragon.
The Derpy Dragon and the ship. Like those are the two things that will stay with me.
If
and
you
everything
like
else
Derpy
is
Dragons,
like gone. I mean, yeah. Yeah. You had a really good
it was and I can only assume that Q2 is going to be a banger.
Listen,
so...
it's already stacked because it has some of our favorites coming back. We have the Time
Slime.
We Got Reincarnated as a Slime. My Hero Academia is coming back. I mean, like, Kaiju number 8 is also starting, and that's a newer one that I'm interested in.
In fact, I can't wait to see what's actually on like Crunchyroll like right now.
Yeah,
That's already caught
this is
up,
our weekly tradition again, so it'll be a lot of fun.
On that note, we'll be off to do that. So
Yeah.
we leave you with these
And
titles
next quarter, you'll probably hear us talk about some more.
for a nice little anime roundup.
Yeah, and that's when you'll see him back on the channel again.
Thereabouts.
All right, thanks you guys for watching. If you watch anime or have watched any of the ones we talked about, definitely tell us how you're feeling about them in the comments, because this is like the one topic where we could probably go on for like
And we could.
a while. Clearly, solo leveling. Anyway, we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!